In this episode of Trial Story.
Do they sound like a teacher-student relationship, or do they sound like a woman obsessed with a 15-year-old boy?
A teacher stands accused of rape.
She is not guilty. She did not rape.
A student's word against a teacher's.
Did the two of you at any time lie in your bed?
Absolutely not.
In this episode of Trial Story, did Karen Cross go too far? A schoolroom seduction, the statutory rape trial of Karen Cross.
This is Tyngsboro, a quiet town on the outskirts of Boston, Massachusetts. This is Tyngsboro Junior-Senior High School, a quiet school free from many of the problems plaguing inner-city schools. This is Karen Cross, until recently a special needs teacher at Tyngsboro High. It's a small community with middle-class values, but all is not as it appears. In 1990, a rumor hit Tyngsboro High, a rumor that a teacher, a married woman, was having an affair with a student. It spread through the community like wildfire. That teacher is Karen Cross. And that gossip led to arrest, indictment, and finally to trial. In the courtroom of Judge Robert Barton in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Karen Cross stands charged with raping a 15-year-old boy, a student at Tyngsboro High. This is a case of statutory rape, which specifically means having sex with a minor, with or without consent. When the United States inherited its basic laws from England more than 200 years ago, one of the concepts that came with it was that young girls should be protected from sexual exploitation by making it a crime for a man to have sex with an underage girl. Harsh felony penalties were imposed. Consent was, and still is, no defense. As American states began to write these laws into statutes, each state established an age of consent. In Massachusetts, that age is 16 years old. Then came the era of sexual equality, and Massachusetts changed its statutory rape laws to make them apply to young males and females alike.
The court calls upon Ms. Caikins for her opening statement.
Thus, the prosecution of Karen Cross, a 33-year-old school teacher, stands accused of having sexual intercourse with a student. Prosecutor Sheila Caikins opens her case.
May it please the court. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on February 14, 1990, Valentine's Day, a woman, 32 years old, had sexual intercourse with a 15-year-old boy. She invited him to her home. She then invited him up to her bedroom, and then she had sexual intercourse with him. I will prove, ladies and gentlemen, beyond any reasonable doubt, that the woman who had sexual intercourse with that 15-year-old boy on February 14, 1990, Valentine's Day, was the defendant, Karen Cross. That 15-year-old boy, ladies and gentlemen, a Tyngsboro high school student, a sophomore. The defendant was a Tyngsboro high school teacher, a special needs teacher.
The identity of the accuser will be protected in accordance with Court TV's policy to preserve the anonymity of alleged sex crime victims and minors.
The defendant began pursuing that 15-year-old boy. And you will hear, ladies and gentlemen, that it started off by just talking to him, by giving him candy, by walking up behind him and rubbing his shoulders, by rustling his hair. And then on February 14th, 1990, she invited him over to her home, under the pretext, ladies and gentlemen, of viewing her husband's car, a Corvette. They sat in the bed, they kissed, they hugged, they rubbed up against each other, and they had sexual intercourse. That was not the last time that occurred, ladies and gentlemen. On two other separate occasions, in February and March, the first week of March 1990, the defendant again invited over her to her home and again invited her into the bedroom and again had sexual intercourse with her. And in March of 1990, the 15-year-old boy was the one that decided that it was wrong and attempted to stop it. At the end of the case, I will come before you again in the closing argument, and I will ask you to find the defendant guilty of each of the indictments of having sexual intercourse with a 15-year-old boy, that boy being. Thank you.
But defense attorney Jim Dangora, who's defending Karen Cross, says she's been wrongly accused.
Karen Cross is a 33-year-old special education teacher in the town of Tyngsboro. She appears before you today charged with a very serious crime: rape and abuse of a child under the age of 16. That child, as you were just told, is one who claims that when he was 15 and a half years old, he had sexual relations with Mrs. Cross. Mrs. Cross denies those allegations. And as Justice Barton informed you a few moments ago, there is a presumption of innocence, and Mrs. Cross does not have to present any evidence. The burden of proof is on the Commonwealth. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Karen Cross will take the witness stand, and she will tell you that she did not at any time have sexual intercourse with. Over a period of time, they began to talk to each other. They became friends, so much so that felt very comfortable in talking to Mrs. Cross. He began to tell her his problems. He began to discuss with her problems he had at home, problems that he had in his relationships with his friends, and problems that he had with his girlfriend. There will be evidence, ladies and gentlemen, of letters that she wrote to him, and could very well be that writing letters to him was not prudent, perhaps not in good judgment. And you will see these letters, and they will even contain what you and I might refer to as street language. But I want you to read these letters when they come into evidence. I want you to look at them very, very carefully. And you will see that there is nothing whatsoever in those letters that indicates that Karen Cross and Rick had sexual relations. Nothing whatsoever. They were friends, but they were not lovers. Based upon that evidence, and based upon that testimony, I will ask you to determine that she is not guilty. And I want to ask you that, ladies and gentlemen, for myself. I'm asking you for Karen Cross, and I'm asking you not to make that decision because I asked you to do that, but to make that decision because the evidence indicates that she is not guilty. Thank you.
Two entirely different stories. Which one will the jury believe? It's a charge that's straightforward. There's no need to prove that force was used or that there was a struggle, but simply that the sex act took place with a victim who was underage. Did Karen Cross have sex with a 15-year-old boy? Prosecutor Sheila Caikins loses no time in calling the state's key witness, the boy who says the answer to that question is yes, the alleged victim himself.
Do you know Karen Cross?
Yes.
And how do you know Karen Cross?
She was in the same room with Mrs. Mayo.
When did you first meet Karen Cross?
When I started being tutored in probably December.
Did you know her prior to that? Did you know of her? Had you seen her before?
I've seen her in school.
But you had never met her?
No, I never talked to her. I met her.
And what were the circumstances under which you met her in the fall of 1989?
Well, she was in the same room, so every morning she'd come in and talk to Miss Mayo and I.
The alleged victim testifies that he and Karen Cross struck up a friendship in January of 1990, often talking to her about her husband's Corvette.
At any time did you discuss with Mrs. Cross going to see that car?
Yes.
And when did you discuss that?
On February 14th.
On February 14th?
Yes.
Was there any other means of communication from the fall of 1989 until the end of January of 1990 between Mrs. Cross and you?
Yes.
And what was that?
She'd write me notes.
And where would she give them to you when she saw you?
Anywhere I ran into her, anytime I saw her.
Would you
In the
give some
hallway.
examples as to like where?
In the hallway, walking to the bathroom, at my locker anytime she saw me.
These notes written by Karen Cross to this student in 1990 could be crucial evidence to the prosecution's case.
How are you? I hope you are having a good weekend. I figured I wouldn't get a chance to talk to you much.
A court clerk reads the notes to the jury, notes which reveal the tenor of the relationship.
I'm the one being honest. I'm not playing games here. I'm really mad and hurt at Isaac. He ruined everything. I've been working so hard to develop a friendship with you. I can't get you off my mind this weekend because of what happened. It's making me to the point where I'm sick to my stomach and my blood pressure is sky high. Good, I wish I didn't care about you so much.
In fact, I really don't care what you think of anything. I only care about what my real friends think and that they stand by me. My little friends stretch the truth a little. I also don't care what other people think about my personality. I'm warm and friendly, and I know I'm not the ordinary teacher, quote, and I'm bound to expect my share of comments because I'm young and crazy, parenthesis, and weird sometimes too, close parenthesis. I also realize I'm no 10, but I'm no number 1 either. Do you know what I mean? Question mark. It also seems to me that you think I'm the cause and root of your problems with Rachel. When you got hit by Jason Riley, I felt bad and told her I really cared about you and that I loved you. She didn't have a problem with that. Only you do. While I'm tired of writing, I hope we can talk someday soon. It may not be important to you, but it is for me. I have some great memories, and I hope you do, especially Hot Day 1990. Awesome. Hey, chill out. Had to say that. Bye. Hope to hear from you. XXX000.
This is the letter that refers specifically to one of the days in question, Valentine's Day, 1990.
You indicated that the first time you had a discussion about going over to see her husband's car was February 14, 1990. What was that discussion?
She told me how much she liked it and how bad she wanted me to see it, so she decided to take me there.
At the end of school, approximately 10:02, what did you do?
I met her at a car. She drove me to her house.
Where did you go after arriving at home?
Parked in the driveway, went in the garage. I looked at her husband's car.
What did you do in relation to the car?
I walked around it, looked at it.
Did you sit in it?
No, I didn't sit in it.
Did you have any conversation with Mrs. Cross about the car?
Just the fact that she told me how much her husband liked it.
Did you tell her what you thought about the car?
I told her I liked it.
And after viewing the car, where did you go?
Into the house,
And where did you sit?
on the couch.
And what did Mrs. Cross do?
She took off her coat and sat down next to me.
On the couch?
Yes.
And what happened after the two of you sat down on the couch?
We started talking more about cars, just general small talk.
And did anything else happen?
Yeah.
And what happened?
We kissed.
And after you kissed, what happened after that?
I took a tour of the house. She showed me around the house.
And when you kissed, did anything? Where were your arms? Where were her arms?
We were hugging each other.
How long were you in the den kissing?
Probably about 15 minutes.
When she showed you around the house, where did you start off in the house?
We went to the kitchen, into the dining room.
And where is the kitchen and the dining room? First or second floor?
First.
And where else?
I saw the spare bedrooms, the bathroom, and then we went into her bedroom.
And was her bedroom the last stop?
Yes.
Would you describe briefly just what the room looks like, how it's laid out?
When you come up the stairs, it's on the left-hand side. You walk in and there's a chest with a big mirror. The bed's
Where is that located?
straight in front of you. The bed's on the left, and off to the right there, closets.
And are you giving the layout of the room with the door behind you?
Yes, with the door behind you.
After the defendant sat on the bed and you sat on the bed and you began kissing, what happened?
We started hugging and rubbing.
When you say rubbing, what do you mean rubbing?
She rubbed my legs, the inside of my legs. Still kissing.
And were you dressed at this time?
Yes.
After the kissing and the hugging and the rubbing the inside of your legs, did something happen?
Yes.
What happened?
We got undressed.
Who got undressed first?
I don't know. Honestly.
Do you remember?
No, I can't remember.
When you got undressed, did you take your clothes off or did she?
I took my own.
And who took her clothes off?
She took her own.
While you were lying on the bed kissing, was there any touching?
Yes.
Did the defendant touch you anywhere?
Yes, she touched my penis.
And when she touched your penis, what did she do?
She rubbed it.
Did you touch her anywhere?
Yes.
And where did you touch her?
I touched her breast. I touched her vagina.
After the touching occurred, what happened next?
I stuck my penis into her vagina.
And at some point, did you ejaculate?
Yes.
When you ejaculated, where?
On her stomach.
How long did this, when you first arrived into the bedroom and sat on the bed, to the point where you ejaculated, how long did that take?
Probably around 20 minutes.
At some point, did you go back to the defendant's home?
Yes.
And when was that?
About a week and a half after.
And when you walked upstairs, what happened?
I had sex with her.
When you say you had sex with her, what do you mean?
Put my penis in her vagina again.
Was there any conversation between the two of you during the sexual intercourse this second?
Nothing more than moaning.
Nothing more than what?
Moaning. No conversation.
In all, the witness describes 3 different times he says he had sex with Karen Cross.
At some point after this third time that you had sexual intercourse with the defendant at her home, did you have a conversation with the defendant?
Yes.
Did you ever go over there again alone after that third time?
No.
And when you had the conversation with the defendant, what did you say to her?
Things weren't right. I felt guilty about what was going on.
And when was this conversation?
Towards the end of March.
Where did the conversation take place?
In school.
What was the reason you didn't feel right?
First of all, I was nervous. I mean,
What were you nervous about?
she was a married teacher in my school. I knew things weren't right.
Damaging testimony if the jury buys it.
Thank you, Judge.
Can defense attorney Jim Dangora challenge his story? As he rises for cross-examination, his options are limited. Karen Cross's only defense can be that sex did not take place.
Told us yesterday that Mrs. Cross began to pursue you in December of 1989, isn't that correct?
Yes.
In fact, you indicated that about that period of time she was chasing you rather vigorously, isn't that correct?
Yes.
You also testified that you did not know her before that date.
Yes.
Now, isn't it true that you were being tutored beginning in September of 1989?
I'm not sure. Sometime in the beginning of the year. I'm not sure the exact date.
And didn't your tutor share the room with Mrs. Cross?
Yes.
And didn't she share the room with Mrs. Cross beginning in September of 1989?
Yes.
So the Mrs. Cross was in the same room that you were in beginning in September of 1989. Isn't that true?
Yes.
So you knew her before September of 1989. Is that true? You knew her before December of 1989.
I had never talked to her.
Never talked to her before that date?
No.
Had you noticed her before that date?
Just walking in and out of the room.
Never said hi to her before that date?
Not that I can remember now.
But you were aware that she was in the room?
Yes.
And you saw her every day?
Yes.
Was that first period?
Yes.
Didn't you tell us yesterday that Mrs. Cross wrote you notes in the fall of 1989?
Yes.
Well, you didn't start talking to her until December of 1989, other than the casual greeting of hi. But it's your testimony that in the fall of '89 she was writing your notes.
She was writing me notes, yes.
But you had never talked to her.
I probably did talk to her, yes.
So before December of '89 you were talking to Mrs. Cross, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so when you told us yesterday you began talking to her in December of '89, that's incorrect. Isn't that true?
Yes.
All right.
Dangora's strategy emerges to weaken the victim's credibility by shooting holes in his testimony.
Isn't it true that you were chasing Mrs. Cross?
No.
Isn't it true that in December of 1989 you made a comment to Mrs. Mayo about Mrs. Cross?
No.
Then defense attorney Jim Dangora introduces a note that the alleged victim wrote to Karen Cross. The court clerk reads it to the jury.
Hey, what's up? I miss being able to talk to you this morning. I'm sorry I upset you by not telling you what the problem was. It's a long story. I just gotta take some time to think things through, but I'll be talking to you soon. Thanks. Love me, X0X0, and then there is a caption. May I read that caption of the baby?
It shows a small infant. It's a picture of a child. Looks like it copied out of a newspaper or a magazine. What does it say?
And caption says, I miss you so much, I could just cry.
Defense attorney Dangora then turns to what the student says happened in the bedroom.
You walked into her bedroom and you sat on the bed. Is that your testimony?
I sat down next to her.
Is it your testimony that you undressed yourself?
Yes.
Did she undress herself?
Yes.
Incident. What was she wearing?
I don't know.
You have no memory of what she had on?
No.
Who undressed first?
I can't remember. I don't know.
And then you claim that you put your penis in her vagina and made love for 20 minutes to a half hour?
Yes.
Incidentally, when did you learn the word vagina?
Excuse me?
When did you learn the word vagina?
Overruled.
When?
Yes.
I don't know. Years ago?
You don't refer to it as a crotch anymore?
No.
By implying through questioning that the alleged victim may not be remembering events clearly, Dangora hopes to shed doubt on his whole story. He saves his best punch for last, asking the witness to remember the exact day when the two additional sexual encounters allegedly took place.
Is it your testimony that she was on vacation a week to a week and a half after February 14th? Is that your testimony?
Sometime after February. My testimony is that she went on vacation the week of school vacation.
Well, let me ask you this. The school vacation was the week after the 14th.
Correct.
Am I correct in saying that you did not make love to her that week?
Overruled.
Is that correct?
You understand the questions?
I understand. No, I probably didn't see her that week. I said a week to a week and a half.
All right, so that If a week to a week and a half takes us through February 25th, isn't it true you didn't make love to her a week or a week and a half later?
No,
You didn't?
no.
So it's your testimony you made love to her the second time between the 14th and 25th?
Between the 14th and 20th. I said a week to a week and a half. A round figure, a week to a week and a half.
Or could it be longer than that?
Maybe it could have.
Would have been the 26th?
It's a Monday. Could have been.
Defense attorney Dangora has scored points, finding a possible weakness in the prosecution's case, that the victim cannot remember when two of the alleged events actually took place. Does that imply they never took place at all? The prosecution's task in a statutory rape trial is straightforward. Prove beyond a reasonable doubt that sex between a minor and an adult took place. There's no question of consent common to forcible rape cases. In a statutory rape case, only the age of the victim is important.
Sit down.
But prosecutor Sheila Caikins tells us that doesn't necessarily make her case any easier. In the end, it will still come down to one person's word against the other. The alleged victim has told his side of the story for more than 4 hours. But Caikins needs more than that to convince the jury.
Truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Thank you. You may be seated, ma'am.
She needs other witnesses to bolster the victim's version of events.
All right, Ms. Caikins.
Would you please state in a loud, clear voice your full name, please?
Eileen Mary Smith Mayo.
I'm going to ask you to keep your voice up. The microphones in front of you do not project your voice.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What is your occupation?
Teacher in the Tyngsboro school system, specifically special education.
Did you ever observe any physical contact between the defendant during October of 1989 until April of 1990?
Yes.
Do you recall when that was? The first time you observed it?
Would have been the beginning of November.
What did you observe?
Mrs. Cross would come in the room through that door. Was sitting with his back towards the door so he would not see her come in. And she would put her arms around her as she did to other students and look into his face.
What was his demeanor when she would do this?
He liked it. It was a friendly interchange.
When she would put her arms around, was there any touching?
Her arms would go like across up to his chest, and she would lean into his face.
How often did you see that occur?
Maybe once a week.
For what time period?
From maybe November, or I shouldn't say maybe, from November till April, beginning of April.
At some point after February 14th, 1990, did you see any change in the interaction between the defendant and...
Yes, I did.
When did you see that occur?
The end of March, the beginning of April.
And what did you see occur?
Their friendliness. Mrs. Cross was still friendly and was acting distant from her. He wouldn't, when she would walk in the room, he didn't look at her or say hi to her. She would say hi to him, and he would ignore it.
Although Mayo is a witness for the prosecution, defense lawyer Jim Dangora sees an opportunity to make a few of his own points.
And you testified that Mrs. Cross would come in the room and put her arms around... Is that correct?
Yes.
She'd look in his face?
Yes.
Isn't it true that she did that with all of the students?
Not all of the students, but yeah, Mrs. Cross is a very bubbly, effervescent type person.
Touchy-feely?
Yeah.
Outgoing?
Yeah.
So she did it to a lot of the students?
Yes, she did.
Not just...
That's correct.
Isn't it true, Mrs. Mayo, that you heard say that he wanted to have sex with Mrs. Cross? Is that correct?
No.
Well, what did he say?
Well, first of all, when? Help us out first.
So let me direct your attention to November of 1989. Maybe I'm using the wrong word. Maybe it wasn't sex. In November of 1989, did you hear say that I want to Mrs. Cross?
Those were his words, but that was not his tone.
Oh, what was his tone? Tell me how he said it.
It was more of a student almost under his, but it wasn't loud. It wasn't for everyone to hear. It was more, gee, you know, I'd like Mrs. Cross. When I heard it, I said, startled, and he looked at me and kind of shook and said, well, you know, she's pretty, she's nice, you know, and then this conversation stopped very quickly.
From your observations, would you say that liked Mrs. Cross?
Yes.
When he made that statement about what he'd like to do to Mrs. Cross, isn't it true that she had just walked by?
Yes.
Remember now, the alleged victim denied on the stand he'd made that comment. Defense attorney Dangora has made his point.
Yes.
But the prosecution's next witness is the victim's best friend. He delivers some damaging testimony.
Do you know Karen Cross?
Yes, I do.
And how do you know Karen Cross?
She's a teacher at Tyngsboro High.
Do you see her in the courtroom?
Yes, I do.
Would you point her out and describe what she's wearing?
A blue jacket with a white shirt. She's
The record
right
may
there.
indicate that the witness has pointed to the defendant.
Directing your attention to the fall of 1989 through to now. Were you friends with?
Yes, I was.
Did you ever have any conversations with the defendant about?
Yes.
And when did those conversations start?
I'd say at the end of February, beginning of March.
Did she ever ask you to deliver anything to him?
Yes, she did.
When was that?
Excuse me?
When was that?
When? At the beginning of March, end of February.
What did she ask you to deliver?
Notes.
Directing your attention to the end of March 1990. Did you have any conversation with the defendant about?
Yes.
How did the conversation come about?
We were talking about things in general. It was usually one of the main topics of the conversations that we talked about. It came
How
about
often had you talked to her about before?
many times.
Who would bring up the conversation, the
Usu-
topic of conversation?
Usually, she would.
On this particular day when you were sitting in the den of her home, what did she tell you about?
That she had had sex with him.
What was her demeanor?
It didn't bother her. She didn't seem terribly upset by it.
Then Isaac goes on to tell of the first time he saw Karen Cross after he and the alleged victim talked to the police.
What did the defendant say to you?
She told me that it was, she told me that she could have sex with anybody who she wanted outside of the school. It was fault. It was his fault because he was still in the school. That's why she was in trouble. She said that she was in trouble with the police and that she was going to lose her job.
Several times the witness has trouble remembering events, giving defense attorney Jim Dangora an opening for cross-examination.
It's your testimony that Mrs. Cross told you that she was having sex with
I brought it up in the
Is
conversation.
that your testimony?
No. Well,
It's not
I brought it up. I'm sorry.
Is it your testimony that Mrs. Cross told you she was having sex with?
No.
It's not your testimony.
Yes, it is.
I have no other questions.
It's a small victory for defense attorney Jim Dangora. But what the jury will never know is that he scored a much bigger one before the trial began. In a pretrial motion, he prevented two students from taking the stand to testify that they too had sex with Karen Cross. The prosecutor wanted the boys on the stand to show a pattern of behavior, but the defense prevailed, arguing that because the boys had been over 16, it was not an illegal act, and the testimony would prejudice the jury. So the prosecution closes without presenting that evidence.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
The defense opens its case by calling the defendant herself Karen Cross.
You solemnly swear the testimony you give the court and jury in the case now pending between the Commonwealth and the defendant shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good morning. My name is Karen Cross.
And Karen, Mrs. Cross, how old are you?
I'm 33.
And what is your home address?
Tyngsboro, Mass.
And with whom do you live at that address?
With my husband, Richard.
And how long have you and Richard been married?
9 years.
Mrs. Cross, do you know?
Yes, I do.
And when did you meet Mr.
I met Mr. in September of 1989
And where did you meet him?
in Tyngsboro Junior Senior High School.
And how did you meet him?
I was a tutoring student at the time.
Were you his teacher?
No, I wasn't.
Were you his tutor?
No.
In September of 1989, how often would you see Mr.
In September, I would see him 3 mornings a week.
Did you have conversations with him?
Yes.
And what did you say and what did he say?
We generally talked about school, and I noticed that he had a magazine one day, and that we started a conversation about cars, and we would have conversations with Mrs. Mayo, just general chit-chat.
Directing your attention to December of '89, did you see him?
Yes, in school.
And how often would you see him?
I continued to see him 5 days a week in the morning.
Did you have conversations with him?
Yes.
What did you say and what did he say?
One morning in particular, I remember a conversation where he was in a car accident that morning, and he came in a little bit late, and he came over to me, and he just kind of gave me a hug, and I said, "I'm so glad you're not hurt."
Let me direct you to the last week of January 1990. Did you see him that week?
Yes. In school?
And did you have conversations with him?
Yes.
And what did you say and what did he say?
I started appearing in my room all the time. He would come in the morning, sometimes early in the morning before school even started. He would come in for his tutoring time. He would come in at lunch. He would come in after school. Sometimes it was just to say hi. He told me that he thought his girlfriend was pregnant. And I didn't really know what to say at first.
Objection overruled. Go ahead, say what you want.
And I said that he was absolutely crazy and out of his mind. He's 15 years old, and that obviously he didn't use any birth control. And I was really upset with him, and I was upset with him because he didn't use birth control. And then I kind of saw that he was feeling really, really upset and really hurt. And so.
Did you have any further conversations with him in late January 1990?
Yes.
What did you say and what did he say?
He would come into my room and come over to my desk, and he would be asking me a lot of questions about my family, and I told him all about my husband, and I told him that my husband bought a Corvette, and he wanted to ask me all the questions about it, what color it was and what it looked like. And he said, do you think I can see it someday? So I said, yeah, no, I don't think that would be a problem. So that we kind of dropped that, and then the next day and the next day, he just started pestering me about seeing the car.
In early February 1990, did you have conversations with him regarding his family?
Yes, I did.
And what, if anything, did he tell you?
He told me that he did not get along with his mother at all, and he couldn't talk to her, and he couldn't talk to his stepfather, and he didn't have any brothers and sisters, and he sometimes didn't trust his best friend Isaac.
Prior to February 14, 1990, did you have further conversations with him?
A few days before February 14th, we discussed, tried to pick a day where I could bring home, and on the way we would stop on the way to my house and see the Corvette, because he had been pestering me about it. So we set up a day that he wasn't working and that I didn't have errands to run, and we were going to go see the car that day.
And did you take him to see the car?
Yes, I did.
And when did you take him to see the car?
February 14th, 1990.
Prior to going to your home that day, did you see him in school?
Yes, I did. He walked in and he told me that he had a gift for me. And I said, oh, I have a little present for you too.
Did he say anything else?
He said he was very excited about being able to see the car that afternoon. And then he gave me the present.
Did you take the present?
Yes, I did.
And what was it?
It was a little, real thin gold colored bracelet.
What time of day was that on February 14th?
That was early in the morning.
And you indicated you gave him something. What did you give him?
I gave him a little brown bear with a little heart on the front that said, little special friend. And he also said, when he gave me the bracelet, he said to me, I hope your husband isn't upset that I bought you a present. And I said, my husband knows that we're friends, and I get a lot of gifts from a lot of students, so I'm sure he wasn't going to be upset.
Did you give any other students gifts on Valentine's Day?
I give a lot of presents to a lot of students. I bought all my kids candy. I buy my students, I don't have a lot of 100 students, so I'm limited to 10, 15, sometimes 20 students, and I usually buy them gifts all the time.
Did you take him to your home that day?
Yes, I did.
Did you have a conversation with him on the way to your home?
Yes.
What did you say and what did he say?
He said, I can't wait to see this awesome car.
And what time did you arrive at your home?
5 minutes after we left, so 2:25.
When you arrived at your home, what, if anything, did you and Mr. do?
We went into the garage, and we looked at the car, and we walked around it, and he was asking me all these questions about the engine, which I couldn't really answer, but he opened the door, and he got in the car, and got back out of the car, and we stood out in the garage for about 20 minutes talking, until it got really cold.
And then what did you do?
Then we went into the family room, which was right off of the garage.
When you went into the family room, what, if anything, did you do?
We sat down on the couch and we started a conversation.
What did you say and what did he say?
He told me that he was so glad he met me and that he was so happy to have somebody to talk to because he couldn't talk to anybody else. And then he said, this house is beautiful. I live in a small condominium. He says, this is a great house. Can I see the upstairs? So I said, yeah. I bring everybody through my house. I give tours of my house when people come over. I'm pretty proud of our house. So we went upstairs and we looked at all the rooms. And I remember him making a comment about a poster that I have. And then we came back downstairs and we sat on the couch and finished our conversation.
And did you drive him home?
Yes.
And when you drove him home, where did you drop him off?
Right in front of his condominium building.
Mrs. Cross, did you make love to Mr. home that day?
No, I did not.
Did you take your clothes off that
No,
day?
I did not.
Did he take his clothes off?
No, he did not.
Did the two of you at any time lie in your bed?
Absolutely not.
So the trial has become what lawyers sometimes call a swearing contest. Two witnesses telling two very different stories. At this point in the trial, the jurors know someone is lying on the stand. And as Karen Cross continues to testify, she'll try to convince them it is not her.
Let me direct your attention to February 16, 1990. What day of the week was that?
That was a Friday.
And did you see him that day?
Yes.
And where did you see him?
That's the day that he came to my house in the morning.
Was he alone?
No, he was with his friend Isaac
And what time did he come to your home?
at 11 o'clock. The reason why he came at
Did you have
11...
a conversation with him?
Yes.
And what was that conversation? What did you say and what did he say?
That day there was no school. That's why I was home at 11 o'clock. And he and his friend came over and were wondering whether the semi-formal was going to be on for that night. And I said I would make a phone call to the school. So I called the school and found out it was still on. And I remember them saying that they were going to pick up their flowers for their girlfriends. And then they stayed for about 20 minutes and left.
The alleged victim had insisted he did not go to Karen Cross's home for a week to 10 days after their first encounter. And he couldn't recall when he next saw Karen Cross after February 14th. Nor could he recall the school dance or the vacation. Dangora's strategy is to demonstrate that Karen Cross's memory is better than his And if she is telling the truth about these events, then perhaps the alleged victim's whole story should be questioned.
You were in the Caribbean that day?
Yes.
The next date is Friday. Next blank date is Friday.
Yeah.
Were you in the Caribbean that day?
Yes.
Did you see him?
No, I did not.
You check that, please. The next day, which is Saturday. Did you see him that day?
No, I did not.
Sunday, the 25th. Did you see him that day?
No, I did not.
According to Karen Cross, the alleged victim and his friend visited her many times at home and in her classroom over the next year, until a day early in 1991.
He walked into my room right at the door, and he said, "I need a pass to talk to you." So I wrote out the pass and I handed it to them. He was with Isaac. And I said to him, "Do you know who's doing this to me? Are you doing this to me?" And I just looked at their faces and I said, "Get out."
Did you have any further conversation with him?
He made a comment to me about a week later in school.
Did you have a conversation with him?
It was a one-way conversation.
Who was talking?
He was.
What did he say?
I was walking out of my classroom and he was standing right at the door and he said, "My mother and I are going to destroy you. We're going to have you put away." And that was the last conversation I've ever had with him.
Did you reply?
No, I did not.
Mrs. Cross, did you ever tell Isaac that you were making love to?
No.
Mrs. Cross, referring you to what has been marked as exhibit number 5. Did you write that?
Yes.
And when did you write it?
About 2 days before school got over. In June.
The letter indicates that our friendship is no longer if we can't communicate, not scream and yell at each other. Did you write that?
Yes.
Did you love?
Yes. In a non-romantic, non-sexual way, but I did. I thought he was the greatest kid. I did.
On the last page, it says that I have some great memories, and I hope you do too, especially Valentine's Day 1990. Did you write that?
Mm-hmm.
What memories are you referring to?
A wonderful talk that and I had that day when he told me his girlfriend wasn't pregnant, and he told me all the wonderful things about. He thought I was wonderful, and that I was so easy to talk to, and my awesome memory was feeling so good about helping a kid. I've been teaching for 12 years, and it just feels so good when you know you're helping somebody. And that was my awesome memory, and knew what that meant too.
Mrs. Cross, did you at any time make love to?
No, I did not.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Caikins.
Karen Cross is held up under hours of questioning by her attorney. But the question of why, if Karen Cross is innocent, her students would have made up such a story is left unanswered. On cross-examination, the prosecution gets tough.
You're 33 years old, Mrs. Cross?
Yes.
You were 32 in 1989-90,
Yes. Well, my birthday was right in the beginning of the year.
and you would have turned 32.
Yes, in January.
Have you ever told anyone that you were 26 years old?
The kids would ask me in school, and I would say, yeah, you know, as a joke. Yeah,
They would ask you if you were 26, or you would tell them that you were 26?
they would ask me.
If you were 26 years old. They just came up with that number.
Yeah, they would try and figure out how old I was. All the kids would try and figure that out. And I'd say, what do you think? They'd say, good, that's great. Yep, mm-hmm.
Did you think it was appropriate to be leaving school with a 15-year-old student by yourself?
Yes, a lot of the coaches took kids in their cars. Very, very close-knit, small school. A lot of coaches
coach?
took students home.
Were you coach?
No, a lot
You
of
weren't
the
his-
teachers took.
You weren't his advisor.
No,
You weren't his teacher.
no,
You weren't his coach.
no, but I still didn't think it was not appropriate to give a ride home. A lot of teachers gave students ride home.
But you
rides
weren't
home.
giving him a ride home, were you? You were giving him a ride to your house.
I was giving him a ride to my house to see the car and then a ride home.
No one else was home at your house.
Not that day, no.
Did you think it was inappropriate to have a 15-year-old boy over to your house alone when nobody else was there?
Absolutely not.
And when you would walk in after getting to know, you would walk up to him, put your arms around him,
Yes.
give him a hug,
Yes.
rustle his hair.
Yes, he had a tail, a little tail, and I used to pull it. Just walk by sometimes and pull it.
But you'd also put your arms around him.
Yes.
And you would kiss him.
I don't recall ever kissing him there, or in that situation, no.
When you hugged him, you hugged him on more than one occasion, didn't you?
Yes.
You hugged him a number of times, didn't you?
A number of times? What?
More than 10?
No, I wouldn't say more than 10.
Less than 10?
Yes.
When you kissed, you said you never kissed?
No, I did not say that. I said I kissed him on the cheek. That's what I said.
Never on the lips?
I don't ever recall kissing on the lips.
Prosecutor Sheila Caikins directs Karen Cross back to the letters that she admits she wrote to the student.
And you said to him, God, I wish I didn't care about you so much.
Yes, I did say that.
And you underlined it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
Did you write notes to any other kids?
I wrote letters to students who were away at school, students who had graduated in the class that I was an advisor for.
Did you ever write notes to kids in school?
Yes.
Who?
I wrote a couple of notes to Isaac, and I wrote a couple of notes to a girl named Andrea.
And were Isaac's all signed by Love Me XXOO?
I don't recall
How about
how they were signed. Yes, I told her right on it, on the bottom, that I loved her.
Would you go XXOO?
All the time. I signed everything that way, everything.
And heart and question marks with hearts at the bottom
Always.
of it?
It's just part of my personality. I signed everything that way.
You indicated that on February 14th, 1990, that you gave a tour of the house.
Yes.
And you started out on the bottom floor.
Yes.
And showed him the former dining room, the former living room, the kitchen.
Yes.
A 15-year-old boy asked you if he could see a tour of your house. He was really interested in it.
Seemed to be. He didn't live in a house himself.
When you got upstairs and you showed him the spare bedroom and the bathroom, the last stop was the bedroom? Your bedroom?
Spare rooms, bathroom. Spare rooms probably first, bathroom, and then my room is off to the left.
And that was the last stop?
Mm-hmm.
Did you go in?
No.
Did
Just
he go
we
in?
stood right at the door. We just looked in.
You didn't show him the big walk-in closet?
It's right. You can't miss the walk-in closet when you stand right at the door of my bedroom. You can't miss anything in there. Everything is facing you in my bedroom, so you can just look in.
So once again, the jury is offered conflicting stories. Karen Cross's denials are as unyielding as ever, but the consistency and the coherence of the story begins to waver.
Question.
Did you find it was necessary to tell that your husband wasn't going to be home and to come over because you were going to be alone?
May I explain that conversation?
I'm just asking you whether or not you thought it was necessary.
It didn't matter one way or the other.
But you felt that that was important to tell him that husband wasn't home, isn't that true?
No.
Well, you wrote it in the note.
Yes, I did write it in the note, but
it
I didn't.
wasn't
You're asking me if I feel it was necessary, and it wasn't necessary.
But you wrote it, didn't you?
Yes, I did. May I explain that?
I'm just asking you whether you wrote it.
Do you want an explanation, Ms. Caikins, or not? Your question. What?
No.
Fine. But you're going to get it on redirect. Go ahead and explain. Go ahead, save some time. Tell us what you meant by why you wrote.
It was in regards to a conversation we had earlier, I think I said this already though, about we were trying to figure out a time, since I hadn't seen him, since I was upstairs and he was downstairs, that we could get together. And we were talking about different days of the week, and I said, Friday, probably not, I'm probably going away. Him thinking I was going away with him, with my husband, And then me telling him in the note, I will be home alone, because in other words, I wasn't going away with my husband, because my husband was going away down to Florida with his mother.
Karen Cross steps down after a lengthy cross-examination. Was she her own best witness, or did she help the prosecution?
The court calls upon Mr. Dangora for his closing
It's
argument.
time for closing arguments. Prosecutor Sheila Caikins and defense lawyer Jim Dangora have presented their evidence to the jury and now have a final chance to underscore their cases.
Ladies and gentlemen, there are only two people who really know what has occurred here. There is a significant dispute on some of the evidence. There is a significant conflict. It really comes down to a matter of credibility, believability, who's telling the truth. On February 14, 1990, there's no dispute. He was in her home. She told you that, and he told you that. Except he tells you they spent a couple of minutes in the garage, they looked at the Corvette, and quickly went into the family room. They began to passionately kiss and rub each other on the couch. Mr. then told you they went into the bedroom. He couldn't tell you who got undressed first. Ladies and gentlemen, he's 50 and a half years old. He's with an older woman, probably what someone would consider a significant moment in their life, something that they would remember. If she was taking her clothes off, is it reasonable to believe that he would be gawking at her? He proceeds to tell you that he made love to her for 20 minutes. He then ejaculated on her stomach, never talking to her. Is that credible? Is that believable? He's 15 and a half years old. They don't talk. They get downstairs. And Mr. said, I told Mrs. Cross, I feel guilty. I feel guilty because of your husband. But you heard testimony that 2 days later, on February 16th, he's talking to her husband. He's talking to her husband about his car. He's 15 and a half years old. He tells you he makes love to a married woman on a Wednesday, and on Friday, he's talking to her husband about his car. Mrs. Cross was very open in the relationship. There was nothing that she tried to hide. Mrs. Mayo knew that he was going to her home on February 14. Mrs. Mayo knew about the notes. Mrs. Mayo knew about the bracelet that he gave her. Of course, he wasn't chasing her, but he gave her a bracelet. She told you, ladies and gentlemen, that she loved him, that she didn't love him in a sexual way, but she cared a great deal about him. She was very honest about that. And ladies and gentlemen, she told you that she did not make love to him on any occasion. And there is not one single thing in those letters that was sent after February, March of 1990 that indicates they were lovers. There isn't one statement in there that says that they were lovers. Nothing, ladies and gentlemen. And please do not lose sight of the fact that Mrs. Cross is not here on trial for writing letters. I ask you, in the name of justice, and based upon the testimony, the evidence that you have before you, to find Karen Cross not guilty. Find her not guilty because the evidence and the testimony indicates that she is not guilty, that she did not rape, she did not abuse, and she did not have sexual intercourse with Mr. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Dangora.
Assistant State's Attorney Sheila Caikins follows a constant theme. Karen Cross violated her trust as a teacher by pursuing an underage student.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I told you when I stood before you in opening statement that I would prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Karen Cross, had sexual intercourse with on February 14th, 1990, and on 2 other separate occasions in February and March. Ladies and gentlemen, the only issue that you really have to decide in this case is whether or not the defendant had sexual intercourse with on 3 separate occasions. The Commonwealth isn't telling you, ladies and gentlemen, that she tied him up in that bedroom and forced him to have sexual intercourse. He was probably flattered by her interest in him in a sexual way. But when it began to involve his little world, that's when he said, no, that's enough. I want nothing to do with this. Who, ladies and gentlemen, was pestering who? What motive, ladies and gentlemen, does Mrs. Mayo have to lie to you? What motive does Isaac have? There is no motive. You've heard no motive of any reason that those 3 would lie to you. But who does have a motive? The defendant. She's the one facing the serious charges, ladies and gentlemen. What about those letters, ladies and gentlemen? Take everything that the Commonwealth put in and just concentrate on those letters. What are the tone of those letters? Are those letters, do they sound to you like a teacher-student relationship? Or do they sound like a woman obsessed with a 15-year-old boy and wanting to get in his life in any way that she can? A few highlights, ladies and gentlemen. Awesome. I have some great memories, and I hope you do too, especially Valentine's Day 1990, written with a heart. Awesome. Does that sound, ladies and gentlemen, like something that happened on February 14th, 1990, the way she described it, that she felt good because she helped a young boy? Is that awesome? Is that something that would think was awesome? Or does she think that thought that February 14th, 1990, when he had sexual intercourse with her for the first time, was awesome? I ask you to find the defendant guilty on all 3 indictments. Thank you.
Madam Foreman, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we have
The
reached
fate
that
of Karen
stage.
Cross is now in the hands of the jury. Will the jury believe her story that she's a demonstrative teacher who developed close friendships with students, or that of the alleged rape victim that she had sex with him when he was a 15-year-old student? Behind closed doors for 16 hours, going over evidence, the jury is deliberating, deciding whether to find Karen Cross guilty of statutory rape. It takes a visible toll on Karen Cross.
The jury has a verdict. This is a very emotional time. I'm going to ask everybody to try their very best to control their emotions because we have to go through some legal procedures. The verdict has to be announced. It has to be affirmed by the other jurors, and we're going to get through it. So please, just try to keep yourself under control as best you can. Counsel and the defendant may rise. Bring in the jury.
On day 6 of the trial, the jury emerges.
The deliberating jury remains standing, please.
Your Honor, may I inquire?
Yes, sir.
Madam Forelady, has your jury agreed upon all of its verdicts? Yes, it has. May I have the verdicts, please, Mr. Officer? Foreperson, on indictment number 91-975, Commonwealth versus Karen Cross. What say you to this indictment? Guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
Members of the jury, you will hearken to your verdict as recorded by the court. The jurors, upon their oath, do say that the defendant is guilty. So say you, Madam Forelady.
Yes.
So say you, all members of the jury.
With defense attorney Jim Dangora straining to listen over his client's screams, the jury delivers a split verdict. It found Karen Cross guilty of 1 charge of statutory rape, but on the other 2 counts, the jury found her not guilty.
You're not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty. Members of the jury will hearken happened to your verdict is recorded by the court. The jurors, upon their oath, do say that the defendant is not guilty. So say you, Madam Forelady.
Yes.
So say you, all members of the jury.
Yes.
The foreperson later told us the verdict was a difficult one to deliver when Karen Cross was so visibly upset in the courtroom. But she said she and the other jurors came to their decision with a clear conscience.
Ready? She doesn't have to stand up. Discharge
Karen Cross on indictment number 91-976, 91-977. The jury has returned a verdict of not guilty on these two indictments. The within indictments at this stage dismissed, and you go without digging insofar as these two indictments are concerned.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth moves for sentencing.
Thank you. Mr. Dangora, I could take a short recess to allow your client to regain her composure. The Commonwealth has moved for sentence. It would seem, under all of the circumstances, it would be best for all if this matter is resolved as far as she is concerned today, rather than having to bring her back at a subsequent date and go through another emotional period. If you want to confer with your client, I'll give you a short recess if you desire, or we can just proceed, and I'll listen to both of you on disposition right at this time.
Your Honor, I suggest we proceed now.
All right, sir. I will hear Ms. Caikins relative to your recommendation.
Your Honor, the Commonwealth's recommendation is that the defendant be incarcerated at Concord for a period of 20 years. The defendant breached her trust as a teacher and role model in the Tyngsboro community. A period of incarceration is appropriate for the seriousness of the conviction. The Commonwealth would also recommend that the defendant be evaluated and undergo treatment and counseling as deemed appropriate by the evaluator.
Mr. Dangora.
Your Honor, I would respectfully suggest to the court that she does not deserve to be incarcerated. She has no prior criminal record. She has never been before any court in this Commonwealth for any reason. It should be obvious to the court that she's not a danger to society, that there's nothing to be served by having her incarcerated, Your Honor, for any period of time. If the Commonwealth is concerned with punishment, I suggest to the court that what has taken place in this courthouse in the past week is sufficient punishment for anyone to endure. Sufficient punishment for her husband, for her mother, her father, and her sisters who have been here each day. Further, Your Honor, when this matter first broke several months ago, she was subjected to numerous harassing phone calls. And I'm sure that the Tyngsboro police will confirm that there were several criminal complaints issued against persons who were harassing her. Your Honor, she's lost her job. She's suffered public humiliation, public scorn. This is not a case that warrants incarceration. I suggest to the court that she has already been sentenced to a life sentence, and I would respectfully request that this is a case for probation.
Statutory rape in Massachusetts carries a maximum sentence of life in prison. The defense has asked for the minimum, requesting that Karen Cross serve no time. The prosecution is asking for 20 years, but that request is not as harsh as the word suggests. In lawyers' lingo in Massachusetts, the prosecutor asked for what's known as a Concord 20, which uniformly means, because of prison overcrowding, that the defendant would serve just 2 years before being paroled.
Students are concerned, the court is going to impose a sentence. However, Mr. Dangora, if you would like to be heard relative to a stay of execution, I will stay the execution of any sentence in this case pending appeal. What do you say, sir?
Again, Your Honor, if Your Honor is inclined to impose a sentence, I would respectfully request that you stay there for 30 days.
Thank you. The record should indicate that Mrs. Cross has no prior involvement with the law and has no record. court has received a letter from the as is the right of the victim or the victim's family relative to sentencing. Ms. Caikins, do you have any objection if I read it into the record?
No, Your Honor, I do not. I think it's appropriate.
This letter is addressed to the court. As you can readily understand, the circumstances and events of this case have affected our family much more deeply than it appears on the surface. First of all, we would like to state that if the past could be changed, our son would never have known Mrs. Cross as intimately as he did. We are not happy that our son is involved in any of this. But we also want it known that we are very proud that our son, having finally realized the inappropriateness of the situation, put a stop to it and endured the public ridicule and humiliation that went along with permanently ending these activities. The relationship between parents and teenagers is usually strained. Teenagers are exhibiting their independence while parents are trying desperately to let them live their lives and at the same time shelter them from anything bad. Prior to involvement with Mrs. Cross, our relationship with him was very normal. But since March 1990, our relationship has changed. While raising, we taught him about morals and values. Unfortunately, he stumbled across a woman who almost made him forget just about everything we tried so hard to teach him. It's obvious that he felt so guilty about his relationship with Mrs. Cross that he felt he couldn't come to us about it. We want to make sure that no other young man has to learn the hard way as did. Please keep this woman out of our school system. Mr. Clerk. Right of appeal to the appeals court and right of appeal on my side. Okay, and she doesn't have this
Okay. Madam Cross, acting for the sentence called as a warrant against you. Served by the court, punished by confinement, mass correctional institution, wall for a period not to exceed 5 years, nor less than 3 years. 1 year of this sentence to be served, and the balance.
The final sentence. Pending appeal, Karen Cross will serve 1 year at Massachusetts Correctional Prison at Framingham with 5 years probation.
You're released. You have to take psychiatric.
The judge later told us that he finds the statutory rape laws out of step with the times. That in this day and age, 15-year-old kids, he said, have the wherewithal to give their consent. Others will be left to ponder if these laws should be changed or if a teacher was punished fairly for committing a crime and that justice was done. I'm Fred Graham for Court TV.